And J.D. Vance is on the phone with us. J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio, also on a short list for Donald Trump. I'm sure he's just dying to talk about that because they always are. Everybody who's on the short list, they're like, oh, please ask me about that. So go ahead, spill the beans. Spill the beans.
my favorite topic. Look,
yeah, I know.
I have said this. I said this, Glenn. I have not talked to Trump about it. Yes, I'm aware that they're looking at me, and I think that they're probably looking at 20 other people, and I'm sure he'll make his decision. And if it's me, then, like I said repeatedly, I'd be interested in it because I think it's important to help him. Because if he doesn't win this election, this country's in a tough spot. So
now
that's pretty much it.
You were in the meeting with him yesterday, right?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, because he said the guy I'm going to pick is most likely in this room with us right now.
So I didn't see that, but unfortunately for the odds makers, there were like 49 other people in the room, so it doesn't help.
Yeah.
But
so tell me,
look, let me just sort of set the stage. I mean, one, it was a very positive meeting, and you obviously have people who are more allied with the president and his agenda, like me and Bill Haggerty, Marco Rubio, and so forth. And then you also have people in the room who are very, even in the last couple of months, have been very critical of the president. And I think what you saw is just a recognition that we have to unify as a Republican Party and win this election. And look, there are guys that are running that I wish their primary opponents had won, and I wish we had a different candidate representing the Republican Party. But there isn't a single person running, at least in the Senate, who I would rather have a Democrat take their spot. The other thing that's really interesting, Glenn, is just you to realize that the internal psychology of Republican senators right now is they're looking at every single one of these Senate ballots, and the polls suggest that whether it's by 5 points or 15 points, our Senate candidates are running behind Donald Trump in the core battleground states. So if we actually want to take back the Senate with a solid majority, we need the president to help us close the margin between our guys and his margin. And I think he will help us do that as we get down the stretch here. But there's just a recognition here that he's tapped into something, especially in this cycle. And if we can get that thing to reverberate to the benefit of our Senate candidates, we can win a major, major victory in the United States Senate.
And he was really kind of conciliatory yesterday. He seemed to be in good spirits and, recognizing that we don't all agree on everything. At least that was the impression I got from his conversation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that, Glenn. I mean, look, he was extremely friendly. He was obviously in a good mood. I think he was very friendly to Mitch McConnell, of course, who's not always been the best ally of Donald Trump. He was friendly to everybody in the room, and he said, look, even when we disagree, our disagreements pale in comparison to the Democrats. And we're at this stage, and I've done this now twice, Glenn. I've been in politics for 2 cycles where right now we're sort of in the hurt feeling stage where a lot of people who didn't win primaries, grassroots activists, donors, state chairmen, and so forth, they're kind of frustrated and they're exhausted from the primary season, and they're not thinking about the future. And I just think, Trump is maybe the only guy in the party who can sort of stand before everybody and say, look, maybe your guy didn't win. Maybe we haven't always agreed on everything, but now it's time to save the country. And to do that, we have to win.
He said yesterday that he was, and I'm going to get to something that you want to talk about, the DEI programs going away, which is so important. Thank you. We'll get to that in a second. But one more question on this meeting yesterday with Trump. He said that he wanted to abolish the income tax and replace it with tariffs.
So that was not in our meeting. I think that may have been in another meeting he had that day. I saw the headlines, but that was not in our meeting. I mean, look, this is a fascinating proposal, and we could talk for a while about it. But, what we have to sort of think about when we tax something, we get less of it. And we should ask ourselves, what do we have to raise revenues for the military and Social Security and so forth.
Correct.
What do we actually want to raise revenues from? And my view would be we want to tax production less. We want to tax making stuff in China more. Well, that's what a tariff fundamentally does. So whether you get rid of the whole income tax, I think it's a really smart idea to say we want to reward people for making things. We want to reward productive work. We don't want to reward making stuff in the home country of our chief rival. And that's, I think, fundamentally where Trump's head is on this matter.
Well, I tell you, if we don't take control of the Senate and the House and the White House, we're just going to be treading water at best. If they win those, we're done. They have put so many deadly fruit trees in all of our agencies and all of our government that I just don't see us being able to survive it. The fundamental transformation will be finished in the next term. And you have introduced legislation to dismantle all of the federal DEI programs from the federal government. Thank you.
Yeah, we have. And to your point about the Senate, Glenn, the Senate's in the personnel business. We approve all of the political appointees. And if you want to root out the deep state and the bureaucracy, you need political appointees who are aligned with the agenda. And what this legislation does, and I'm not an idiot, Joe Biden's not going to sign it, but Donald Trump would. And what it would do is really destroy the diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucracy that exists in our country. And people say, well, who doesn't like diversity, right? Doesn't diversity just mean, you have a nice Mexican restaurant down the street? No. Well, the way that our federal government has interpreted this is to explicitly allow racist decision-making, primarily targeting white and Asian Americans now in the 21st century, but explicitly racist decision-making in contracting and hiring, in the provision of grants. Some of these programs, by the way, have been held flatly illegal by the federal courts. For example, there was a farm program that explicitly excluded white Americans from the provision of farm assistance for our farmers. And that's ridiculous. Right. You can't discriminate whether black or white against people on the basis of skin color. This would proactively root this stuff out of our government. And it's a very important first step to getting basic merit back in our federal system, Glenn.
Yeah, and I don't think that even black farmers would have wanted that. I mean, maybe some would, but farmers rely on each other, and they need to help each other because if Bill's crop is down this year, it might be my crop down next year. So we're all in this together. The last thing you want are now new racial barriers between neighbors where he gets the help from the government and we don't. It's not a good idea.
Glenn, it's not a good idea at all, Glenn. And to your point about how black farmers feel about this stuff, if you look at public polling on this, what you consistently find is that black Americans and most white Americans don't like racial quotas. They don't like racial discrimination, whether it benefits them, their group, or harms their group. The one group of Americans that seems to really like racial quotas are very high education white Americans. That is the one group. That is the one group that seems, by the way, they're not going to lose out when the quota system comes because they pull all the strings, but they're not doing it for the good of the country. I think they're fundamentally doing it because they look down on they look down on white Americans who don't have their same educational status. And a lot of, one of my theories, Glenn, is that a lot of what is broken about America is high education whites who really hate lower education whites. And I think you see that as a main driver of a lot of very stupid public policy and, frankly, a lot of very evil public policy in this country. So we got to root it out. We got to be proactive about it. That's what I'm trying to do.
I mean, it's really, it wasn't like this before because our education system was much more local, and not as, you didn't have all of the smart people going to this one college. And so they were only surrounded by really, really smart people and then get married to the same kind of thinking. You would have a great disparity in education and experience in families all the time. But now the elites, they wouldn't marry into a farming family. They don't understand it. They don't like it, generally speaking.
No, that's right, Glenn. So there is this real classism, right? I think that's a much bigger problem than racism in modern America. But it's actually made our education system much stupider because, to your point, you used to have, of course, you'd have, the smart kids would become doctors and lawyers and engineers, and the kids who didn't like school as much would do something else. But sort of everybody lived together and worked together, and the community kind of worked together. When you silo people by education, what we find is that we send people to colleges and they don't get good training in useful skills. They increasingly get indoctrinated into how to be crazy people. So even the educational institutions stop serving their function when you stratify this thing in such a ridiculous way. And I think you're certainly seeing evidence of that in our country right now.
So what are the chances that this even passes, this legislation? I know Biden won't sign it, but do you think it'll even get passed?
I don't think it's going to get out of the Senate. I think the House would support this. But what we're trying to do is plant seeds, Glenn. One of the things that happened in the 2016 campaign is Republicans really expected Trump to lose. And so when he actually won, there wasn't the foundational work that had been done to make to just pass a bunch of really good legislation. We're trying to do that. We're trying to set up the next administration for success. And at the very least, have a debate about what kind of country we want. Do we want a country that discriminates based on race? I think the answer is no, and I think 90% of people agree with me.
Do you believe that the next administration can fire enough people to make a difference in the deep state?
I do, Glenn, but it will be one of the most important fights. I mean, I think the two things that hopefully President Trump does in his second term, and I know he wants to do, but will cause massive backlash from the media, is we need to deport a large number of the illegal immigrants who have come here over the last few years. And we also need to really root out the federal bureaucracy to make it more responsive, to make it smaller, but to really make it democratically accountable to the people's elected president. The media is going to howl about this stuff. They'll call it fascism. They'll call it every name in the book.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Exactly. It's accountability, right? That is the opposite of fascism. And frankly, if we have fascism at the bureaucratic level where people's lives are controlled by people they never elected, right? That's not democracy. That's not Republican form of government. So look, this is the most important thing structurally that we have to fix at the government. I think Trump is committed to it. And I think the question is, do you have enough Republicans in there who have the willpower and the courage to fight alongside of them? I think that's the big question.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of people like you. Where when we did the Tea Party thing years ago, we just didn't have the people in there who really truly had the foundation that they'd been thinking about for a long time. And I think we do now. We have a lot of really good people. We need more, but this is the best chance of success that I've seen in a very long time. The Tea Party turned out to be, we were really fighting the deep state in the Republican Party, and I think that one is on its last legs.
Look, we need to win the fight, Glenn, and if we don't, I really do think we could lose our country.
Yes, I agree. JD, thank you very much. I appreciate it.